Throughout human history, the death penalty has been a controversial and widely debated topic. This form of extreme punishment has been applied by various governments and legal systems, each with its own justifications and arguments. In this script, we will explore 6 notable death penalty cases that carry significant weight, both in terms of social impact and their execution. The first case we will address is that of Saddam Hussein, the former dictator of Iraq. After being overthrown in 2003, Hussein was tried and sentenced to death by hanging for crimes against humanity. His execution, broadcast live by global media, shocked the world and raised questions about the justice and legitimacy of this type of punishment, especially when applied to political leaders. The second case is that of Timothy McVeigh, responsible for the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people. McVeigh was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection, in a process that sparked heated debates about capital punishment and its effectiveness as a form of justice. The third case is that of Aileen Wuornos, an American serial killer who was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection in 2002. Her case gained extensive media coverage due to her turbulent life story and the controversy surrounding the application of the death penalty to a woman. Her execution raised questions about gender equality in the criminal justice system. The fourth case is that of Mumia Abu-Jamal, an African-American political activist and journalist sentenced to death for the murder of a police officer in 1981. His case became a symbol of the fight against racial injustice and the death penalty, with many advocates arguing that his trial was marked by irregularities and biases. The fifth case is that of Troy Davis, an African-American man sentenced to death for the murder of a police officer in 1989. His case attracted international attention due to strong evidence of his innocence and the lack of conclusive proof. Despite appeals and protests, Davis was executed by lethal injection in 2011, raising questions about the reliability of the criminal justice system and the application of the death penalty. The sixth and final case is that of Carla Faye Tucker, a woman sentenced to death for double murder in 1983. Her case generated controversy due to her religious conversion and the campaign for the commutation of her sentence, led by prominent figures. Despite efforts, Tucker was executed by lethal injection in 1998, sparking debates about redemption, mercy, and the application of the death penalty to women. These 6 death penalty cases highlight the complexity and controversy surrounding this form of punishment. Each presents unique elements that challenge our understanding of justice, equity, and humanity. For example, Saddam Hussein's case raises questions about the legitimacy of the death penalty applied to political leaders, while Timothy McVeigh's case questions the effectiveness of the death penalty as a form of justice. Aileen Wuornos' case, in turn, brings up the issue of gender equality in the criminal justice system. Mumia Abu-Jamal's and Troy Davis's cases highlight concerns about the reliability of the justice system and the possibility of judicial errors, especially when the death penalty is at stake. Finally, Carla Faye Tucker's case addresses themes such as redemption, mercy, and the application of the death penalty to women. These 6 cases represent just a fraction of the numerous examples of death penalties that carry significant weight, both in terms of social impact and their execution. Each of them leads us to reflect on the ethical, legal, and moral complexities surrounding this form of extreme punishment. The questions raised by these cases do not have simple answers. They force us to confront our own values and beliefs about justice, equity, and the state's role in applying the death penalty. Some argue that the death penalty is a necessary form of justice, while others see it as a violation of human rights. Regardless of our personal positions, these cases demonstrate the importance of a continuous and in-depth debate about the death penalty. They remind us of the need for a criminal justice system that is fair, transparent, and sensitive to the nuances of the human condition. As we explore these 6 emblematic death penalty cases, it is essential to recognize that they are just the tip of the iceberg. There are countless other examples around the world, each with its own stories, contexts, and implications. For example, the case of Nguyen Tuong Van, a young Australian sentenced to death for drug trafficking in Singapore, raised questions about the application of the death penalty in drug-related crimes. Or the case of Rayhana Jabari, an Iranian woman sentenced to death for the murder of her sexual assailant. which triggered debates about gender justice and the protection of women. These cases, along with the 6 we previously explored, demonstrate the need for a deep and contextualized analysis of the death penalty. It is not just a legal punishment but a phenomenon that reflects the social, political, and cultural complexities of each society. As we continue to explore this topic, it is important to recognize that the death penalty is not just a phenomenon of the past. It is still applied in many countries around the world, and its use continues to be a topic of intense debate and controversy. Recently, cases such as Jakar Tsarnaev, one of those responsible for the Boston bombings, and Dylan Roof, the perpetrator of the attack on a church in Charleston, in the United States, have generated heated discussions about the application of the death penalty in crimes of terrorism and racism. These more recent cases demonstrate that the death penalty is still a present reality in our society, and that debates around this form of punishment remain relevant and necessary. They remind us of the importance of analyzing this issue comprehensively, considering not only the legal aspects but also the ethical, social, and political implications involved. As we deepen our analysis of the death penalty, it is essential to examine not only the emblematic cases but also the broader trends and patterns related to this form of punishment. For instance, studies have shown that the death penalty is disproportionately applied to ethnic minorities and socially vulnerable groups. This raises questions about the fairness and justice of the criminal justice system, especially when the death penalty is at stake. Additionally, research has questioned the effectiveness of the death penalty as a tool for crime prevention and deterrence. Some argue that this form of punishment is no more effective than life imprisonment and that its use may even contribute to the perpetuation of violence. These patterns and trends compel us to critically rethink the death penalty, not just in specific cases, but in a broader context. They challenge us to consider whether this form of punishment truly fulfills the objectives of justice and public safety that supposedly justify it. As we continue to explore the complexity of the death penalty, it is important to recognize that this issue is not limited to individual cases or general trends. It is also closely linked to broader debates about human rights, ethics, and the role of the state. Some argue that the death penalty is a fundamental violation of human rights, as it deprives individuals of their right to life. Others contend that, in certain cases, the death penalty can be justified as a form of justice and retribution. These ethical and philosophical debates about the death penalty are crucial to our understanding of this issue. They force us to confront our deepest beliefs about the nature of justice, the legitimacy of the state, and the dignity of human life. Furthermore, the death penalty is also closely linked to political and geopolitical issues. Some countries use it as a tool for social control and maintaining power, while others reject it as an unacceptable practice. In exploring the death penalty in its entirety, it is essential to understand that this form of punishment is not limited to individual cases or general trends. It is deeply rooted in our social, political, and cultural systems, reflecting the dynamics of power, inequality, and conflict that permeate our societies. For example, the disproportionate application of the death penalty to ethnic minorities and marginalized groups is not just a matter of criminal justice, but also a reflection of the structures of oppression and discrimination that persist in many parts of the world. These patterns of inequality challenge our notion of equality before the law and force us to rethink the state's role in administering justice. Additionally, the death penalty is closely linked to issues of national sovereignty and international relations. Some countries use it as a tool for asserting power and projecting geopolitical influence, while others reject it as an unacceptable practice, imposing sanctions and diplomatic pressures. In analyzing the death penalty in its entirety, it is fundamental to recognize that this form of punishment is not just a legal or political phenomenon, but also a reflection of our own beliefs, values, and biases as a society. Our attitudes towards the death penalty are often influenced by factors such as culture, religion, education, and exposure to different narratives and perspectives. Some defend the death penalty based on arguments of retribution and justice, while others reject it for ethical, moral, or humanitarian reasons. These differences in perception and values compel us to confront our own convictions and reflect on the complexity of the human condition. After all, the death penalty is not just a legal issue, but also one that touches the core of our humanity and our understanding of right and wrong. In exploring the death penalty in its entirety, it is essential to recognize that this form of punishment is not just a static phenomenon but a subject in constant evolution and transformation. As society progresses, our perceptions and attitudes towards the death penalty also change. For example, in recent decades, we have witnessed a global movement towards the abolition of the death penalty, with an increasing number of countries opting to abandon this practice. This movement reflects a paradigm shift in which the dignity of human life and fundamental rights gain more prominence in public debate. At the same time, in some regions, the death penalty continues to be applied intensively, often in response to social, political, and public safety challenges. These cases remind us that the fight for the abolition of the death penalty is an ongoing process that requires constant advocacy, education, and awareness efforts. In exploring the death penalty in its entirety, it is essential to recognize that this form of punishment is not just a legal or political phenomenon, but also one that involves issues of mental health, trauma, and rehabilitation. Many individuals sentenced to death carry life stories marked by violence, abuse, poverty, and lack of opportunities. These social and psychological factors can play a crucial role in the trajectory that led them to commit serious crimes. In this context, the death penalty can be seen not only as a punishment but also as a failure of the system to provide adequate support and rehabilitation. Additionally, the process of sentencing and executing the death penalty can profoundly impact the mental health of those involved, including the condemned, their families, justice professionals, and even society as a whole. This human dimension of the death penalty is often neglected but is fundamental to a broader and more empathetic understanding of this issue. In exploring the death penalty in its entirety, it is essential to recognize that this form of punishment is not just a legal, political, or social phenomenon, but also one that involves issues of identity, culture, and historical heritage. In many societies, the death penalty is deeply rooted in traditions, beliefs, and narratives that go back centuries. These cultural and identity elements can shape how the death penalty is perceived and applied, often perpetuating patterns of inequality and oppression. For example, in some cultures, the death penalty may be seen as a form of ancestral justice, a way to restore honor and social order. In this context, the abolition of the death penalty may be perceived as an imposition of external values, challenging the very roots of identity and tradition. Understanding this cultural and historical dimension of the death penalty is fundamental to addressing this issue sensitively and respectfully, seeking solutions that balance justice, ethics, and respect for the diverse identities that make up our global society. I invite you to explore the next videos, full of valuable teachings, practical tips, inspiring stories, and powerful tools to help you achieve the success you so desire. Fuel your mind with knowledge, be inspired by success stories, connect with people who resonate on the same frequency, and prepare to live a full, abundant, happy, and fulfilling life.